In 2012, Barry Gilton and his wife found out that their 17-year-old daughter was working for a pimp in Los Angeles, California. The couple did everything they could do to try and stop it, even called the police to get help. But when that didn't work, Barry Gilton's family decided to take the law into their own hands. Barry Gilton was born in February 1974 in San Francisco, California. Growing up, he lived in the Fillmore district, an area that during the 80s and 90s saw a significant rise in violence as competing neighborhood gangs went to war over drugs and turf. Barry Gilton grew up in the middle of the violence, surrounded by gang members and drug dealers. But instead of joining a gang, Barry followed his passion for basketball, playing all through high school as a guard on the Mission High School basketball team. While in school, he met Lupe Mercado, the woman who would later become the mother of his children. And after high school, the two had 4 kids and began their life together. Through the years, Barry continued with basketball, coaching youth basketball teams and working at local community centers. Many of the young basketball players looked up to Barry as a mentor, and he always encouraged them to stay in school and stay out of gangs. In 2011, Barry and his wife's oldest child, Leticia, began having difficulties at school. Attempting to give her a fresh start, they let her move to Los Angeles to live with Barry's cousin, Antonio Gilton. While living in LA, Leticia met Calvin Sneed, a 22-year-old pimp from Compton, California, and the two quickly began a relationship. But a few months later, back in San Francisco, Barry Gilton received word from Los Angeles that his teenage daughter was working as an escort. It was said that Calvin Sneed had convinced Leticia to engage in prostitution, and that she was being exploited by the 22-year-old pimp. After receiving this information, Barry and his wife dropped everything and drove to Los Angeles to try and get their daughter to come back home. The couple first tried to persuade Leticia to leave Calvin. When that didn't work, they filed a report with the Compton Police Department, registering her as an underage runaway. They also added Leticia's name to several websites for missing and exploited children. But all of these efforts failed to get Calvin Sneed out of their daughter's life. Around the same time that Barry Gilton and Lupe Mercado were in Los Angeles, an attempt was made on Calvin Sneed's life. As Calvin sat in his car, an unidentified individual walked up and fired 9 shots through his car window. Calvin was injured, but survived the attack. Prosecutors for the case would later say that this was the first attempt by Leticia's parents to end Calvin's life, an accusation that they both denied. The second attempt on Calvin's life came on June 4th, 2012. But this time, it was successful. Calvin was again sitting in his car when a group of men in a silver Mercedes SUV pulled up alongside him. One of the passengers reached out the window and shot Calvin in the head, killing him. 2 weeks later, Leticia's parents, Barry Gilton and Lupe Mercado, were arrested for the murder. Police alleged that after hearing their daughter was working as a prostitute for Calvin Sneed, the two became desperate to get him out of her life. Desperate enough, the police said, to commit murder. Barry Gilton and Lupe Mercado, however, maintained they were innocent, and both pled not guilty. But Leticia's parents weren't the only ones arrested for Calvin's murder. Barry's cousin, Antonio Gilton, and an associate, Alfonso Williams, were also arrested as co-conspirators after police found evidence placing the 2 men at the scene of the crime on the day of the killing. And police alleged that the 2 men were known gang members in San Francisco. As detectives pieced together the case, they found what they called a connection between Barry Gilton and a local San Francisco gang called the CDP. Detectives alleged that if Barry's cousin Antonio Gilton and their associate Alfonso Williams were known CDP gang members, then Barry must be a gang member too. So his original charge of murder was changed to a RICO murder case, meaning that the prosecution believed that Barry knowingly murdered Calvin Sneed as a pattern of racketeering activity with a gang. But when his case went to trial, the judge ruled that there wasn't enough evidence to prove that Barry was part of any gang. The prosecution also couldn't prove that Barry had engaged in multiple acts of racketeering activity as a gang member. So, he was acquitted for the RICO conspiracy and for the murder of Calvin Sneed. And after having served 8 years behind bars, Barry Gilton was released from prison. Leticia's mother, Lupe Mercado, was also acquitted for the murder charge, but she was convicted for being an accessory after the fact. After serving 7 years in prison, she was released. Barry's cousin Antonio Gilton and their associate Alfonso Williams both pled guilty to participating in a drive-by shooting and murder. They were sentenced to 22 and 25 years. From 2012 to 2021, the case of Barry Gilton dominated news websites across California, bringing up conversations about ordinary people who become vigilantes by taking the law into their own hands. In a CBS interview, Calvin Sneed's father, Charles Sneed, made a rare appearance, saying that although his son was troubled and doing things that he shouldn't have been doing, he didn't deserve to die. The San Francisco district attorney for the case also made a statement, emphasizing that while he could understand a parent's frustration in this type of situation, vigilante murder is still murder. But the one question that everyone was asking each other is, what would you do?